My name is Marie, a 32-year-old software engineer who spent 5 years developing groundbreaking AI technology for RapidTech. I poured my heart, soul, and countless sleepless nights into creating something revolutionary. Raymond, our CEO, was more than my boss. He was my mentor, or so I thought, until that fateful shareholder meeting, when he publicly fired me with a smirk on his face. What he never expected was that I had anticipated his betrayal for months. Sometimes the smartest person in the room isn't the loudest, but the most prepared. Before I tell you how I turned this public humiliation into my greatest triumph, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever been underestimated at work. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs from the beginning. But when opportunity knocks with the promise of innovation, creative freedom, and the chance to change the world, skepticism often takes a back seat to ambition. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago, the daughter of a high school math teacher and a librarian. My parents weren't tech-savvy, but they nurtured my curiosity and analytical mind. While other kids had posters of pop stars on their walls, I had diagrams of computer processors and algorithms. Geeky. Absolutely. But those childhood passions carried me to MIT on a partial scholarship where I graduated summa cum laude in computer science. Despite my credentials, breaking into the male-dominated tech industry proved challenging. I interviewed at 12 major tech companies, making it to final rounds at 7, only to be passed over for candidates with more experience or a better culture fit. Code 4, we prefer to hire men, as my college roommate, Rebecca, bluntly put it. After 18 months of contract work and freelance coding, I attended the Tech Forward conference in San Francisco. During a panel discussion on artificial intelligence ethics, I challenged a speaker about the limitations of their approach to machine learning. After the session, a tall, distinguished man in an expensive suit approached me. "That was quite the intellectual takedown," he said, extending his hand. Raymond Barnes, CEO of RapidTech. I recognized the name. RapidTech was a rising star in the AI space, not yet a unicorn, but showing tremendous promise. We talked for nearly an hour about neural networks, algorithmic bias, and the future of human-computer interaction. By the end of our conversation, Raymond handed me his business card with his personal number. "We need minds like yours at RapidTech," he said. "Call me tomorrow. I want you to lead development on our new AI platform." 2 weeks later, I walked into the RapidTech office in Palo Alto, California. The space was modern but modest, with about 30 employees working in an open concept layout. Raymond greeted me himself, introducing me to key team members. Daniel Parker, a software architect with kind eyes and a quick laugh, would be working closely with me on implementation. Jessica Martinez from Human Resources helped with paperwork, explaining the company's generous benefits and stock option plan. Then there was Marcus Chen, the chief financial officer, whose handshake was perfunctory and whose eyes never quite met mine. Even then, I sensed his skepticism, but dismissed it as natural caution from the person watching the bottom line. "Marie is going to revolutionize our approach to conversational AI," Raymond told them, his hand on my shoulder. "Give her whatever resources she needs." Those early days at RapidTech felt magical. Our team was small but incredibly talented. We worked long hours, but it never felt like a burden because we believed in what we were building. Raymond regularly brought in lunch for brainstorming sessions, rolling up his sleeves to whiteboard ideas alongside us. He seemed different from other tech CEOs I had encountered. Less ego, more collaboration. At least that was the impression he cultivated. In most companies, ideas flow from the top down, Raymond told me during one late-night coding session. But the best innovations come from giving brilliant minds the freedom to create without constraints. I thrived in this environment. For the first time in my career, I felt truly valued. My ideas weren't just heard but implemented. My concerns weren't dismissed, but addressed. Gradually, RapidTech began to feel like home and my colleagues like family. Jessica from HR became a close friend. We started taking weekend hiking trips in the nearby mountains, discussing everything from company dynamics to our dating lives. Daniel and I developed a sibling-like rapport, constantly challenging each other to think differently and push boundaries. Even Marcus seemed to warm up slightly, though he remained the most distant member of the leadership team. I devoted myself entirely to RapidTech, regularly working 80-hour weeks. While friends from college bought homes, got married, or traveled the world, I poured everything into building something revolutionary. Raymond noticed my dedication. "You know, Marie, most people work to live," he said during my first performance review. "But creators like us, we live to work. That's why we'll change the world." His words validated my choices. The sacrifices seemed worthwhile because I wasn't just building a product or a company. I was building my future. With my stock options set to vest after 4 years, I was potentially looking at financial independence if RapidTech continued its trajectory. More importantly, I was creating something meaningful. Our AI platform wasn't just another chatbot or virtual assistant. We were developing a system that could learn how humans solve complex problems and then assist in ways that augmented human creativity rather than replacing it. The applications ranged from medical diagnosis to climate modeling to artistic collaboration. "This could be your legacy," Raymond said, as we celebrated our first successful prototype. 20 years from now, people will talk about how Marie Winter changed human-computer interaction forever. I believed him. I believed in the vision, the company, and most dangerously, I believed in Raymond Barnes. That belief would cost me dearly, but it would also ultimately lead to my greatest triumph. The breakthrough came during my second year at RapidTech. After months of hitting walls with our core algorithm, I had a moment of clarity at 3 a.m. while walking my neighbor's dog. I was dog-sitting for the weekend, and something about the rhythm of the walk cleared my mind. Our approach had been fundamentally flawed. We were trying to make the AI process information sequentially similar to how traditional algorithms work. But human cognition doesn't function that way. We make intuitive leaps, form partial solutions, and revise our thinking as we go. I rushed back to the apartment, barely remembering to return the neighbor's dog, and coded for 20 straight hours. By the time I finished, I had created what we later called the parallel cognitive processing framework. Instead of handling problems linearly, the algorithm worked on multiple solution pathways simultaneously, constantly evaluating and refining its approach based on partial results. When I demonstrated the prototype to the team, the room fell silent. Then Daniel let out a low whistle. "This changes everything," he said. "Marie, you just made our competitors obsolete." Raymond was ecstatic. He immediately called an all-hands meeting where he announced my breakthrough to the entire company. For the next week, I rode a wave of professional adulation. Raymond brought me into strategic planning meetings I had previously been excluded from. Marcus, normally reserved with praise, conceded that my innovation would significantly accelerate our timeline to market. Over the next several months, my algorithm became the foundation of everything RapidTech built. We integrated it into applications for healthcare diagnostics, financial modeling, and creative content generation. Beta tests showed performance improvements of 400% over competitor products. Suddenly, RapidTech wasn't just another AI startup. We were revolutionaries. The company grew rapidly. Our team of 30 expanded to over 100 within 6 months. We moved to a sleek new office in downtown Palo Alto, with glass walls, dedicated quiet spaces, and a gourmet cafeteria. Raymond hired a chief marketing officer, a VP of sales, and Thomas Gibson, a shrewd general counsel from a major tech giant. With growth came subtle but significant changes. Raymond stopped attending technical meetings, focusing instead on investor relations and media appearances. My direct access to him dwindled from daily interactions to weekly scheduled meetings, then to occasional email exchanges. During a major tech conference in Austin, I watched from the audience as Raymond presented our technology to industry leaders. His slide deck featured graphs and technical specifications I had prepared, but something was missing. RapidTech's proprietary algorithm represents a fundamental shift in artificial intelligence, he told the crowd, never once mentioning my name or contribution. Afterward, I approached him at the VIP reception. "Great presentation," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Though I noticed you didn't mention the development team." Raymond's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Marie, at this level, it's about the company vision, not individual contributors. These investors don't care about technical details, they care about results." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. Later that evening, I overheard Raymond talking to a venture capitalist. "The breakthrough was the result of our unique company culture," he was saying. "I've assembled a team that thinks differently." It was technically true, but the omission stung. Still, I told myself that this was simply how business worked at this level. The company's success was ultimately good for everyone involved, including me. Then came the Series B funding round. RapidTech secured $120 million at a valuation of nearly $1 billion. We were officially entering unicorn territory largely on the strength of my algorithm. The entire company celebrated with a lavish party at a winery in Napa Valley. During the celebration, I overheard a conversation that sent a chill through me. I had stepped onto a balcony for fresh air when I heard Raymond and Marcus talking on the terrace below. Once we lock in the Series C, we should think about restructuring the technical team, Marcus was saying. Agreed, Raymond replied. Some of the early hires aren't scaling with our growth. They were right for the startup phase, but not for where we're headed. Were they talking about me? It seemed impossible given my contributions, but doubt crept in nonetheless. That night I checked my stock option agreement. I still had 2 years before my initial grant fully vested. If they pushed me out before then, I would lose most of the equity I had earned. Over the next few months, I noticed more concerning patterns. I was excluded from meetings about the product roadmap. My suggestions were increasingly met with "we'll consider it," rather than immediate implementation. New engineers were assigned to enhance my algorithm without consulting me first. Most alarmingly, my name was removed from internal documentation as the principal architect of the core technology. When I questioned Jessica from HR about this, she seemed uncomfortable. It was a directive from legal, she explained. Thomas is standardizing all our technical documentation to protect our intellectual property. Then came the email that confirmed my worst fears. It wasn't even meant for me. Someone in IT accidentally included me on a thread between Raymond, Marcus, and Thomas discussing elimination of redundancies post-Series C. My name appeared in a list of original team members with a note about significant compensation liabilities approaching vesting dates. They were planning to fire me before my stock options vested. The company I had helped build into a near billion-dollar enterprise was going to cut me loose before paying what they owed me. That email changed everything. The betrayal cut deep, but it also awakened something in me. If Raymond Barnes thought I was just another naive engineer he could discard when convenient, he had severely underestimated me. My first step was to secure legal advice. Through a college friend, I connected with Eleanor West, an attorney specializing in intellectual property and employment law in the tech industry. We met at a small cafe in Mountain View, far from RapidTech's orbit. Before we discussed specifics, Eleanor said after introductions, "I need to review your employment contract and any IP agreements you signed." I slid a folder across the table. Everything's there. Employment agreement, confidentiality provisions, stock option grants, and the employee handbook I received when hired. Eleanor spent 30 minutes reading through the documents, occasionally making notes. Finally, she looked up. "This is fairly standard Silicon Valley boilerplate with one interesting exception," she said, pointing to a clause on page 17. Section 4B contains unusual language regarding intellectual property rights upon termination. I leaned forward as she read it aloud. In the event of employee termination without documented performance issues, or cause intellectual property substantially created by the employee, reverts to joint ownership between the company and the person's creator. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means if they fire you without proper documentation of performance issues, you retain partial ownership of anything you created, Eleanor explained. This is remarkably favorable language for an employee. Most companies ensure all IP belongs exclusively to them regardless of termination circumstances. Is it legally binding? Absolutely. Someone on their legal team made a significant oversight. This likely slipped through before they brought on experienced counsel. She tapped the clause. This is your leverage, but only if you can prove the intellectual property was substantially your creation, and they terminate you improperly. That night I began methodically documenting everything. I created a secure cloud storage account under a new email address and uploaded copies of all my work, including original design documents, code commits, showing my authorship and email exchanges, documenting my role as the primary creator of PLACE, the Parallel Cognitive Processing Framework. I also started recording all meetings I attended, which was legal in California, as long as one party in the conversation knew about the recording. In my apartment, I created a detailed timeline of the development process with specific attention to pivotal moments where my contributions were clear and undeniable. The next day at work, I decided to confront Raymond directly about being excluded from strategic meetings. I caught him between appointments. "Do you have a minute to discuss my role on the executive team?" I asked. Raymond checked his watch. "Walk with me to my next meeting." As we moved through the office, I laid out my concerns. "I've noticed I'm being excluded from product roadmap discussions. As the creator of our core technology, I should have input on its future development." Raymond's response was dismissive. "Marie, your technical expertise is valuable, but we're focused on scaling now. The business side is taking priority. Trust the process." "The process seems to involve sidelining the person who created the technology that makes this company valuable," I countered. He stopped walking and turned to me, his expression hardening slightly. "No one is irreplaceable in this industry, Marie. RapidTech is bigger than any individual contributor now." The message was clear. In his mind, my usefulness was diminishing. I nodded and returned to my desk, more convinced than ever that I needed to protect myself. That afternoon, Rebecca Torres, another engineer who had been with the company almost as long as I had, stopped by my desk. "Everything okay with you and Raymond?" she asked quietly. That looked intense. I shrugged non-committally, but Rebecca leaned closer. "Listen, Marie, you should know this isn't the first time this has happened. Paul Winters, one of the founding engineers, was pushed out 3 months before the Series A. His options never vested." "What happened?" I asked. Suddenly, there were concerns about his performance. Documentation appeared. He was gone within 2 weeks. She glanced around to ensure no one was listening. Then they built directly on his work for the next product cycle. This new information sent me digging deeper. That evening, I searched the United States Patent and Trademark Office database for filings by RapidTech. What I found made my blood boil. The company had filed 3 patents based on my algorithm listing Raymond as the primary inventor and me as a secondary contributor. The applications had been filed 4 months ago without my knowledge or consent. The next morning, I came in early to talk to Daniel. If anyone would give me straight answers, it would be him. I found him in the break room making coffee. "Daniel, can I ask you something confidentially?" I began. He looked around before nodding. "What's up?" "Have you noticed anything strange about executive meetings lately? Meetings I should be part of but am not invited to?" Daniel hesitated, then sighed. "There have been weekly strategy sessions with Raymond, Marcus Thomas, and the new VP of Engineering. They're held off-site, and the calendar invites are sent through personal email. Do you know what they discuss?" "Not specifically, but after the last one, Raymond asked me how difficult it would be to continue development on your framework if you weren't here." Daniel looked uncomfortable. I told him it would set us back significantly, but he seemed undeterred. I thanked Daniel for his honesty, my suspicions now fully confirmed. That afternoon, Jessica from HR sent a company-wide email announcing an all-hands meeting to discuss a major company milestone. Included was information about an upcoming shareholder meeting where Raymond would be presenting our technology to major investors ahead of our Series C funding round. The presentation was scheduled for 2 weeks before my 3-year work anniversary, the date when a significant portion of my stock options would vest. The timing couldn't be coincidental. They were planning to showcase my technology, then dispose of me before paying what I had earned. That night, I called Eleanor again. "I need to prepare for the worst-case scenario," I told her. "If they try to fire me, what exactly should I do?" "Document everything. Make sure you have proof of your contributions. And if they make a move, don't sign anything, don't agree to anything. Call me immediately." She paused. "And Marie, file provisional patents under your name for anything you created. It won't guarantee ownership, but it creates a record of your claim." I spent the weekend filing those patents, meticulously documenting every aspect of my innovation. Come Monday, I was as prepared as I could be for whatever Raymond had planned. But nothing could have prepared me for the public humiliation he had in store. The shareholder meeting was held at the Four Seasons in San Francisco. No expense was spared. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. Staff in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvre. RapidTech had rented the hotel's largest ballroom and transformed it into a showcase of technological opulence. I arrived early dressed in my most professional attire, a navy blue suit I had purchased specifically for the occasion. Raymond greeted me with his camera-ready smile. "Marie, perfect timing. We want you near the front during the presentation." His enthusiasm seemed genuine, which only increased my anxiety. What was he planning? The room gradually filled with investors, board members, and industry analysts. I recognized venture capitalists from Sequoia Capital, Andreessen Horowitz, and several other top-tier firms. This wasn't just a shareholder meeting, it was a coming-out party for RapidTech as a major industry player. At precisely 6:30, Raymond took the stage to applause. The lights dimmed, and a sleek video began playing on the massive screen behind him, showcasing RapidTech's journey from scrappy startup to industry innovator. 3 years ago, RapidTech was just an idea, Raymond began once the video concluded. Today, we stand at the forefront of artificial intelligence, poised to transform how humans and computers interact forever. He launched into a presentation about our technology using terms and concepts I had developed, but presenting them as though they were collective innovations or worse, his own insights. I noticed Marcus watching me from across the room, a subtle smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Our proprietary parallel cognitive processing framework represents a quantum leap in AI capability. Raymond continued, clicking through slides that displayed my work. This technology developed here at RapidTech processes information the way humans do, making intuitive leaps rather than following linear paths. The description was almost word for word from a paper I had written, yet my name wasn't mentioned once. Still, I maintained my composure. This was business. Companies presented unified fronts to investors. Individual credit often took a back seat to corporate messaging. Then came the pivot that changed everything. "Success requires not just innovation but discipline," Raymond said, his tone shifting. "As we prepare for our Series C funding round and potential IPO, we've undertaken a comprehensive review of our team and processes." He clicked to a new slide titled Organizational Optimization. "Sometimes this means making difficult decisions about personnel." Raymond's eyes found mine in the audience. "Marie Winter, please join me on stage." My heart began racing as I made my way to the platform. Was this finally recognition for my work? The timing seemed strange, but perhaps Raymond had reconsidered his approach. As I took my place beside him, Raymond turned to address me directly, but his words were projected for everyone to hear. "Marie, you were one of our earliest team members, and your initial contributions were valuable to RapidTech's development." Initial contributions. Past tense. My stomach tightened. However, Raymond continued, "Over the past year, serious concerns have emerged about your performance and commitment to company objectives." The room fell silent. I could feel dozens of eyes on me as Raymond began listing a series of fabricated issues. Documentation shows repeated missed deadlines, resistance to collaborative efforts, and inability to adapt to our scaling needs. Each accusation was more outrageous than the last. Most concerning has been your attempt to claim individual credit for collective achievements. None of this had ever been communicated to me. There had been no performance improvement plans, no written warnings, nothing in my file suggesting any issues with my work. This was character assassination, pure and simple. Therefore, Raymond concluded, effective immediately, your employment with RapidTech is terminated. The words hung in the air. My face flushed with heat, and I could hear blood rushing in my ears. Around the room, people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked down at their phones or programs, unwilling to witness my humiliation. I moved to speak, but Raymond continued. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items. Your access to company systems has already been revoked." He turned to me with a smirk visible only to me and added quietly, "You should have read the fine print about those unvested options." In that moment, I understood completely. This public execution wasn't just about removing me before my options vested. It was about discrediting me so thoroughly that if I ever challenged them on my intellectual property, my claims would seem like the desperate actions of a disgruntled ex-employee. But Raymond had miscalculated. Badly. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the microphone. "Before security arrives, I have a question for our general counsel." Raymond tried to interject, but I continued calmly. "Thomas, would you mind reading Section 4B of my employment contract aloud for our shareholders?" I believe it's relevant to this discussion. Thomas Gibson looked to Raymond uncertainly. Raymond gave a dismissive wave, likely assuming the request was inconsequential. Thomas produced a tablet, pulled up my contract, and began reading. Section 4. B. In the event of employee termination, without documented performance issues, or cause intellectual property, substantially created by the employee, reverts to joint ownership between the company and the creator. His voice cracked as the implications became clear. Raymond's face drained of color. I believe what just happened constitutes termination without documented cause, I said into the sudden silence. Which means ownership of the parallel cognitive processing framework, the technology this entire company is built upon now, legally reverts partially to me as its creator. And just like that, the power dynamic in the room shifted completely. For several seconds, no one moved or spoke. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air like static electricity before a lightning strike. Raymond recovered first, forcing a laugh. Marie, this is hardly the venue for legal interpretations, he said, reaching for the microphone. We can discuss your separation package privately. I stood my ground. Actually, this is exactly the venue. You chose to terminate me publicly in front of our shareholders. They deserve to know the implications for their investment. A silver-haired man in the third row stood up. I recognized him as Victor Gladstone from Alpine Ventures, one of our earliest investors. I'd like to understand what this means, he said, addressing me directly rather than Raymond. Are you claiming ownership of RapidTech's core technology? Not claiming, I corrected politely. According to the contract RapidTech had me sign, I now legally co-own the intellectual property I created, which includes the parallel cognitive processing framework that powers all of RapidTech's products. Raymond tried to regain control. This is a complex legal matter that our counsel will address appropriately. For now, let's return to the presentation. I think we need clarity on this issue before proceeding, said another investor, a woman from Horizon Capital. If there's a dispute over IP ownership that materially affects our valuation discussions. I reached into my bag and removed a thumb drive, holding it up. On this drive is comprehensive documentation proving I was the sole creator of the algorithm in question. It includes original design documents, all code commits showing my authorship, and email exchanges where Raymond and others acknowledge my role. I inserted the drive into the laptop connected to the presentation system. With a few clicks, I pulled up a folder containing hundreds of files meticulously organized and dated. You can see here the evolution of the framework from initial concept to functional implementation. Every key innovation came from my work, often against the recommendations of others who wanted a more conventional approach. Raymond stepped forward. Marie is presenting a very selective view of a collaborative process. Many people contributed to this technology. Then perhaps you can show documentation of those contributions I suggested. Because I have emails from you, Raymond, specifically praising my revolutionary approach that none of us would have considered. I clicked to an email Raymond had sent after my breakthrough, displayed on the large screen for all to see. Marie, you've created something extraordinary here. This approach never would have occurred to any of us. This is why I brought you on board. Murmurs spread through the audience. I continued methodically, showing the progression of my work and the gradual removal of my name from company documentation after the technology proved successful. Furthermore, I added I've brought statements from 3 former RapidTech employees who witnessed my development of this technology. I nodded toward the back of the room where Paul Winters and 2 other former colleagues had entered as planned. They're prepared to testify about both my role and the pattern of RapidTech pushing out early employees before their equity vests. The Horizon Capital investor spoke again. Mr. Barnes, did you knowingly terminate Miss Winter before her stock options vested? Raymond's face hardened. Business decisions are made based on performance, not compensation considerations. Yet you provided no documentation of performance issues prior to this meeting, observed Victor Gladstone, which appears to trigger the contract clause just read. Another investor stood. Thomas, as general counsel, what's your assessment of the company's position here? All eyes turned to Thomas, who looked deeply uncomfortable. The language in Section 4B is unfortunately clear. Without prior documented performance issues, termination does trigger the IP ownership provision. He swallowed hard. However, we would contest whether the technology was substantially created by Miss Winter alone. I anticipated that position, I replied calmly, which is why I've already filed provisional patents under my name for the key components of the framework. The patent office will determine inventorship based on evidence, not company politics. Raymond's composure finally cracked. This is absurd. She's bluffing. She signed standard agreements like everyone else. Actually, I said, pulling out one final document. Here's confirmation from the United States Patent and Trademark Office of my provisional patent applications filed last week. The timestamps on my original work predate any company documentation by months. The room erupted in conversation. Investors huddled together, board members conferred urgently, and Raymond stood isolated on stage, his carefully orchestrated power play unraveling before his eyes. Victor Gladstone approached the stage. I think we need to pause this meeting and convene the board immediately. He turned to the room. I apologize to our guests, but we need to address this situation before proceeding with any investment discussions. As security finally arrived, summoned by Marcus, Victor intervened. Miss Winter will be joining our emergency board meeting. She stays. And just like that, rather than being escorted out in disgrace, I was walking into the hotel's executive boardroom alongside the investors who controlled RapidTech's fate. Raymond followed his earlier confidence, replaced by barely concealed panic. The tables had turned completely. In trying to discard me, Raymond had handed me the leverage to reshape the entire company. The emergency board meeting began in barely controlled chaos. Board members and key investors crowded around the mahogany table, while Raymond was asked to wait outside until called. This small indignity seemed to shake him more than anything else that had happened. Let's establish the facts, said Victor Gladstone, who had naturally assumed leadership of the meeting. Miss Winter, please summarize your position clearly. I laid out the situation methodically. I created the core technology that powers all RapidTech products. My employment contract states that if I'm terminated without documented cause, I retain joint ownership of intellectual property I substantially created. Today, Raymond fired me publicly without any prior documentation of performance issues triggering that clause. I have comprehensive evidence of my role as creator, including provisional patents filed to protect my interests. Thomas Gibson, looking distinctly uncomfortable, confirmed the contract language. The clause exists as stated. It appears to have been included in early employee contracts before I joined the company. This is a disaster, said Lydia Rosenthal, another board member. We're 6 weeks from the Series C. This IP dispute could kill the entire round. Not to mention potential investor lawsuits, added another board member. We've been presenting this technology as wholly owned by RapidTech. For the next hour, the board peppered me with questions about my intentions, the extent of my claims, and potential resolutions. I remained professional throughout, never raising my voice or making threats, simply stating facts and referring to documentation. What exactly do you want, Miss Winter? Victor finally asked. I want fair recognition for my work and fair compensation for my contributions, I replied. I've dedicated 3 years of my life to building technology that has made many people in this room wealthy on paper. I was willing to wait for my equity to vest as agreed. It was RapidTech that violated our arrangement, not me. The board asked me to step out while they deliberated. In the hallway, I found Raymond pacing his usually immaculate appearance, slightly disheveled. You won't get away with this, he said when he saw me. You signed confidentiality agreements. We'll bury you in litigation. I smiled politely. The confidentiality agreements have exceptions for defending my own interests in legal proceedings. Everything I've done is protected. You might want to spend less time threatening me and more time explaining to the board why you created this crisis. Before he could respond, we were both called back into the boardroom. The atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Where there had been panic, there was now grim resolution. Victor addressed us both. We've reached some preliminary decisions. First, Raymond, the board has lost confidence in your leadership. We're asking for your resignation effective immediately. Raymond's face contorted in shock. You can't be serious. I built this company from nothing. You've put the entire company at risk with reckless personnel decisions, Lydia stated flatly. The Series C is now in jeopardy because of your actions. As for you, Miss Winter, Victor continued. We propose the following reinstatement of your position: immediate vesting of all promised equity, plus additional shares equivalent to 2% of the company, and a seat on the technical advisory board. I considered the offer. It was substantial but still undervalued my contribution. That's a start but insufficient given the circumstances. I want 5% equity retroactive salary adjustment to match other executives, a seat on the actual board, not just an advisory position, and a public statement acknowledging my role as creator of the core technology. The negotiations continued for another 2 hours. Raymond was excluded from most of it, sitting silently in a corner chair, watching his company slip from his grasp. Finally, we reached terms: 4% equity back pay, a board seat, and recognition as Chief Technology Officer with public acknowledgement of my role as inventor. One more condition I added as agreements were being drafted. Raymond forfeits his golden parachute. Those funds will establish a pool to compensate other early employees whose contributions were similarly minimized. The board members exchanged glances, then nodded. Raymond's face went pale as he realized the full extent of his defeat. By midnight, the lawyers had drafted preliminary agreements for everyone to sign. Raymond's resignation letter was short and devoid of the flowery corporate language he typically favored. As we prepared to leave, he approached me one last time. "You won't succeed," he said quietly. "You're an engineer, not a business leader. The board will use you for the technology, then find another way to push you out." I looked him directly in the eyes. "The difference is I'll be watching for it this time. And unlike you, I understand that true power comes from creation, not manipulation." The next morning, I watched from my newly assigned executive office as Raymond cleaned out his desk, supervised by security. Employees whispered among themselves, trying to piece together the dramatic overnight change in leadership. At 10 o'clock, the board called an all-company meeting. Victor Gladstone addressed the assembled staff. Effective immediately, Raymond Barnes has resigned as CEO. The board is initiating a search for his replacement. In the interim, our executive team will collectively manage operations. He paused. Additionally, Marie Winter has been appointed to the position of Chief Technology Officer and will join the board of directors. The announcement was met with stunned silence, followed by scattered applause that grew stronger. I noticed Daniel grinning widely, and Jessica gave me a subtle thumbs up from the back of the room. When the meeting concluded, Thomas Gibson approached me. "The board has asked me to offer my resignation as well. I should have caught the contract issue." I considered this. Instead of resigning, "How about you help me draft better protections for all our engineers? This company needs counsel who understands that respecting intellectual contribution is good business." Thomas looked surprised but nodded. "I can do that." As employees returned to their desks, many stopped to congratulate me or express their amazement at the turn of events. One junior engineer, Andrea Kim, lingered after the others had gone. "Is it true what they're saying?" she asked. "That you created the core technology and they tried to take it from you?" "Yes," I replied simply. She nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for fighting back. It matters to the rest of us." In that moment, I realized my victory wasn't just personal. It had implications for every creator who had ever been marginalized or had their contributions minimized. The responsibility of that realization was both humbling and energizing. Later that afternoon, the board offered me the interim CEO position while they conducted their search. I accepted on one condition: that we delay the Series C funding round by 3 months to reorganize the company with better protections for all intellectual property creators. Victor Gladstone smiled at this stipulation. "You know, that might actually improve our valuation in the long run. A company that genuinely protects innovation attracts better talent." "Exactly," I agreed. RapidTech's value isn't in any single technology. It's in creating an environment where breakthrough innovation can happen again and again. As I left the boardroom, I felt a profound sense of both closure and new beginning. The company I had helped build was still standing but transformed. And so was I. 6 months after that fateful shareholder meeting, RapidTech was almost unrecognizable, both as a company and as a workplace. The physical space remained the same sleek glass and steel in downtown Palo Alto, but the culture and structure had undergone a complete metamorphosis. I declined the permanent CEO position when offered, preferring to remain as CTO with expanded responsibilities. My strength is in creation and innovation, I told the board. Let me focus there while we find someone whose passion is organizational leadership. We eventually hired Elaine Madison, a respected industry veteran with a reputation for ethical leadership and transparency. From our first meeting, I knew she was the right choice. The technology is impressive, she said after reviewing our product line, but what really interests me is what you're building culturally. A company that genuinely values intellectual contribution is rare and powerful. Under our new leadership team, we implemented several structural changes. First, we revamped all employment agreements to ensure clear attribution and fair compensation for intellectual property creation. We established a patent review committee comprising engineers from different levels, not just executives, to determine proper inventorship on all filings. We also created a more transparent equity system with accelerated vesting schedules and better protection against arbitrary termination. Most significantly, we established a creator recognition program that ensured those who developed key innovations received both financial rewards and public acknowledgement. These changes weren't just moral victories, they transformed our ability to recruit top talent. In an industry where skilled engineers had abundant options, our reputation as a place where creative contribution was genuinely valued became a powerful differentiator. The personal transformation was equally profound. The experience had changed me in ways I never anticipated. The shy engineer who once avoided conflict now confidently led technical reviews and board presentations. I found my voice not just in code but in company direction and industry conversations. One particularly meaningful project was reconnecting with former employees who had been pushed out under Raymond's leadership. Paul Winters, whose warning had helped prepare me for Raymond's betrayal, was the first person I contacted. I never expected to hear from RapidTech again, he said when I called, at least not without a legal letterhead at the top of the page. I laughed. Things have changed dramatically. I'd like to discuss properly crediting your contributions and potentially compensating you from the equity pool we established. Over the following weeks, we brought several former employees back into the fold, either as consultants or with offers to rejoin the company. Their institutional knowledge proved invaluable, and the gesture sent a powerful message about our new values. 3 months after the leadership change, our Series C funding round closed successfully at a valuation 20% higher than initially projected. Investors cited our commitment to sustainable innovation and talent retention as key factors in their confidence. Not everything was smooth sailing, of course. Some employees loyal to Raymond resigned. Competitors tried to capitalize on the transition by spreading rumors of instability. There were challenging days when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. During one particularly difficult week when a major client threatened to withdraw over concerns about our leadership transition, I found myself questioning whether I had taken on too much. Jessica now, our chief people officer, found me working late in my office. Having regrets, she asked, perching on the edge of my desk. I sighed. Not regrets exactly, just wondering if I should have walked away clean instead of taking on the challenge of rebuilding. Jessica considered this. You know what makes you different from Raymond. He saw the company as a vehicle for his ambition. You see it as a community you're responsible for. She smiled. That's harder, but it creates something that lasts. Her words stayed with me. We were building something that could outlast any individual, including me. That perspective helped me navigate the challenges with greater patience and resilience. As part of our commitment to ethical leadership, I began speaking at industry events about intellectual property rights and creator recognition. This led to an invitation to lecture at MIT, my alma mater, on the subject. Standing before a lecture hall of bright young engineers, I shared my experience without embellishment. The technology industry talks constantly about innovation, I told them, but often fails to protect the actual innovators. Understanding your rights is as important as understanding your code. After the lecture, a young woman approached me. Your story really resonated with me, she said. I'm graduating next month and have offers from several tech companies. How do I know which one will value my contributions? Ask specific questions about their IP policies, I advised. Ask to speak with engineers at different levels about recognition practices. and trust your instincts about the culture. The way they respond to your questions tells you as much as the actual answers. These conversations reinforce something I had learned through my own experience. Preparation and knowledge are the best protections in any environment. I couldn't prevent every potential betrayal or unfair treatment, but I could equip myself and others to respond effectively when they occurred. Back at RapidTech, our transformation continued. 6 months after Raymond's departure, we released a new version of our AI platform with capabilities that exceeded even my original vision. The collaborative environment we had created allowed for innovations that might never have emerged in the previous culture of fear and credit hoarding. During the launch celebration, Elaine raised a toast to Marie, whose technical brilliance created our foundation and whose courage gave us the chance to build something truly exceptional upon it. The applause that followed was gratifying, but what meant more was the knowledge that we had created a company where such recognition was the norm rather than the exception. The scars from my experience remain. I approach business relationships with greater caution, now document everything meticulously, and read every contract with extreme care. But these habits have made me a more effective leader and advocate not just for myself but for others who might otherwise be marginalized. If there's wisdom in my story, it's this. Your greatest power comes not from position or title, but from the value you create and your willingness to stand firmly for what you've built. Prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Document your contributions not out of paranoia, but out of self-respect. And remember that sometimes the fine print isn't your enemy but your ally, if you take the time to understand it. The journey from that humiliating moment on stage to rebuilding a company based on genuine innovation and respect wasn't easy or straightforward, but it has created something far more valuable than what existed before, both for me personally and for everyone involved in our shared mission. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself professionally? What helped you find the courage to do so? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes justice does prevail when you're prepared to fight for it. Thank you for listening to my journey from public humiliation to professional triumph.